It's really impressive. They don't, a lot of times you have two mics and they're, but they seem fun. Okay, I can always step back if you want to. Yeah, it's really impressive. They don't, a lot of times you have two mics and they're, but they seem fun. And I can always want to sit down over here in the corner. Here, I'll take my junk down. Won't clutter up the place.
Dave.
Yes.
True spelled exactly like it sounds.
That's right. True, false.
And you go by Dave or David?
If you're happy with me, Dave. If you're upset with me, David. That's. What are we calling this, guys? Partisan Faith.
The church in the age of polarization.
Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay.
Just editing the...
All of it. What a way to do church right now.
All right, Pam.
Yes, sir.
Will you do me a favor? So, Jesse, why don't you just go to another microphone and talk for a moment?
Okay, we're just testing out the microphone here. How is it doing, Peter?
I can hear it here. Pam, I want you to... Do you see the class on your phone?
Say my question, say your question again.
Do you have the church's YouTube channel on your phone?
Yes, I do, but nothing's coming up, so it just says Dave's College Presbyterian Church Directory.
Can you refresh it? Actually, here's how I'll do the test. Jesse.
Yes. Okay, we're just testing out the testing the microphone.
So do this, say this one thing. Peter, stop talking to me.
Peter, stop talking to me. Phone here. How is it doing?
Church's YouTube channel on the phone.
Yes, I do, but nothing's coming up, so it just says Dave's College Presbyterian Church Directory.
Can you refresh it? Actually, here's...
Leadership is not the only thing they didn't teach in seminary, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're just testing out the testing the microphone.
So do this, say this one thing. Peter, stop talking to me.
Peter, stop talking to me. Is it rolling, Bob?
So just for everybody to know, Jesse, Dave, whoever goes up there, the live feed is live. And you have whatever, now at any point, if you're on a microphone and you talk, people on YouTube are going to hear it.
Okay.
There's just a lot of noise on this picture.
No, it's just because we were doing a lot of talking.
Okay, I'm getting out of here, this is not.
Any advice on?
Any advice on what? Yeah, use the password is actually at the top of that calendar.
Okay.
It's in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay.
Calendar.
Thanks, Peter.
Good morning. Welcome again. We're delighted to have our friend Dr. David True with us again. And John, as you know, John Ryan is in Montreat this weekend, has set up all of this technology, and Peter got us started. So we are streaming on YouTube for several minutes now, and available on YouTube after this. So please pray with me. Gracious God, in this, our church on the corner of the beautiful campus of this extraordinary college, we pray with great confidence that you will never cease to teach us discomforting truths. In church today, we hear the scripture that recounts that when Jesus first preached in Nazareth, those who heard him were filled with rage, and they drove him out of town. Make us worthy witnesses of the Jesus who filled people with rage. Amen. And again, I'm delighted to welcome back Dr. David True, Associate Professor of Religion at Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. David and his wife live here in Concord. His wife, Ellen Crawford True, is senior pastor at First Presbyterian in Concord, which we know because Scott Kennefaik was interim there after serving in that role here. They have a daughter attending Davidson College. David is a founding member of the executive committee of the Political Theology Network, and he's going to talk to us today about the church and political polarization. David?
Thanks for that. It's good to be back with y'all. I'm not sure how to take that, introduction. It's one of the first times I've been called upon to evoke rage. So, no, I appreciate it. This morning I really want to talk with you and raise questions for you and with you, and really about a knotty kind of problem. So I don't really bring you any answers today, and of course that's kind of, what scholars take pride in is complicating things. It's kind of, okay, here we go again, but maybe we can. This is a problem I'm working on right now in my research, and a friend and I are trying to write a couple of books on it, but I just don't know. So. We're back to old school handouts, right? So if you want a visual, that you have that right in front of you. These are just slides I would have walked through with you. So so you've got the title slide, and then why the really? Well, this is my error. An older title was talking about politics and church. Really? And so the really, right, is... Hey, there's been a lot go on in the last year and so. Just to mention, of course, the Capitol riot, just extreme partisan polarization, right? That's not anything new to any of you. And so that just gets us real quick to a question of, do we really want to talk about that? Isn't politics too divisive for congregations to touch, right? I got a no out there, which I appreciate, and you're here, so I know you want to hear a little bit about it, but I just want to acknowledge that, DCPC, you're a little unusual. This is not a talk every church is up for. I don't get asked to come to a lot of churches to talk about this, right? Now, why bother to talk about polarization? Well, in other words, given how divisive politics can be, why risk talking about it at all? Right? Now, I don't know exactly where DCPC is on a political spectrum or a theological spectrum. My sense is kind of middle left. Does that sound? Anybody want to Give me a head nod, a bob. So, but yeah, I think a lot of church. What is church for in America? Well, what Peter Berger, the late famous sociologist, said was that in the 19th century, what had happened was, as you went from DCPC as the church in Davidson kind of model to 18 other churches around, right? As you went from kind of a state church in the late 18th century to religious freedom, and you get pluralization, we don't come together in one community church and have an organic sense of union, and then the word is spoken to the community, and hey, now the community goes out and acts on that word. Instead, what we have are people going to many different congregations. Right? This is following the Revolutionary War. That's how old this is. And as capitalism and industrial capitalism really take hold, and you work, what do you do on Sunday? You come to church for a kind of retreat from that. Right? A kind of comfort. To hear the word of God, that God loves you. And I see the argument. Come on. That's not right. So again, you're a little unusual, but if that's what religion in America is and has been for a long time, that is, it's a kind of gentle therapy after a rough week in the world, then why would you want to come and hear about the divisive stuff of politics? Right? Do you see that? That's one of the reasons it's so tough to talk about this stuff. Now, if we go on to the next page, well, why should we talk about it? Well, just our own Reformed theology points us in that direction, right? And I've given, Reformed theology looks like it embraces democracy. So if you care about democracy, that would be a reason to talk about politics. And then we have several theological notions there. I better be careful on the time. I don't want to, this page alone, this little slide here can take the whole darn show, you know. So let me pull up a clock here and keep us on time. We get out about 20 till? Or we want to roll quarter of? Okay. So let's see. We'll talk about this page for 5 minutes. So reform, you can take my word on it, Reformed Christianity embraces democracy, and we can talk about that if you want. But the claim of God as a sovereign God or the lordship of Christ, right? So there's no region of our lives, no sphere, no area or arena outside Christ's lordship, right? So politics falls under the lordship of Christ. You're not going to say, well, here's all my spiritual stuff, and that's what Jesus is concerned about, and then over here, well, I do my own politics. Right? That doesn't work in the Reformed tradition, which Presbyterians are part of. Any questions about that one? The third one, life as a pilgrimage, goes with the next one. So this is a metaphor that comes right out of Augustine. Calvin embraces it. And on this pilgrimage of joys and sorrows, of celebrations and aches and pains, of losses and tragedy, of struggles, Calvin said, following Scripture, God provides helps along the way, whether it's sun and water or good government. Right? These are things God has provided. See that positive view of government there? As essential as the sun. Very kind of different than most of our feelings today where we kind of, politics, right? But that's the Reformed tradition for you. The fourth one, law itself can be a form of grace, not simply a form of coercion and order. This is the famous in Calvinist and Reformed circles called the third use of the law. The third use. So, if you read Luther one way, he has two uses. Law is there to constrain evil. Hey, that speed limit is out there to keep me in check, right? It's there to convict of guilt. When I step off here, when I hurt, when I steal from my neighbor, it convicts me. Right? Turns me back to confession. So constrain and convict. Calvin says also to guide. It's to guide us in a sanctified life. That is in pursuing the will of God to live a holy and righteous life. The law can be a help there, can be a guide there. Right? So that kind of, in a secular kind of mood, you have a higher appraisal of law. Calvin said that law was a form, or could be a form of grace. So Presbyterians, Reformed people, have generally been interested in law, seen it as a positive, maybe sometimes getting a little carried away in a legalistic manner, but also very, tending towards professions of law and engaged in the running of their societies. Okay. So that's almost all of them, and then finally vocations, which I was here last fall to talk about, I think. And you just heard too much on that, I think, so you already know that. But one of the vocations then, growing out of the Protestant Reformation thought, would be to have a vocation as citizen. Right? God calls me to be active in the running of my community and my communities. Okay, any questions about those? I probably didn't even need to do that. You're probably already convinced, or you wouldn't be here. Yes.
Is the law referred to here the biblical, the law, or the governmental, the law?
So it's going to be both, right? So it has a basis in the Bible. So 10 Commandments, Jesus is speaking of law. And where for Luther, the OT, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, was about law and a promise of grace. Calvin said, no, the whole darn thing, Old Testament and New Testament, is about grace, and the law is a form of grace. So then, if you're running Geneva then, and you're drawing on Scripture inspiration, or I say you're running, I'm not saying Calvin ran Geneva, but if you're helping govern your communities, you're going to draw on that biblical law, but then you're also going to craft law that you think is good, right, that can guide. So again, that can err on the side of legalism. We're going to have law for everything to guide you. But we just want to make a minimal claim there that it definitely has a kind of high appraisal of law. For many Americans, right, get off my back. Right? So a little bit of an odd pre-modern tradition here that's come up, helped shape the country, and then the country has gone its own way on a number of issues. Right? Kind of not really embracing this tradition in some ways. Any other questions? All this is to say, hey, our own theology tends to encourage us to care about such matters and to want to talk about them together. Right? So we look a little unusual in today's modern society, and there may be tensions there within us. One, we don't want to cause friction. Two, don't we need to talk about these together? Isn't what's going on in government important for us? Don't we have a stake in it? Isn't God calling us to be responsible about it? So, two questions then. For you, is this our tradition? Is this your tradition? And I don't necessarily need a vocal answer, but if this isn't your tradition, right, you could be sitting out there going, no, I don't see that. I don't feel that. or you could be online and think, do you identify with this kind of reformed thinking here or not? If so, if you do, if in some sense this is your tradition, how does it inform the life and work of our congregations? That's a much talked about, that's one way we could come at it this morning, right? So what do we do about, how's that, what do we could then ask, I don't know, about Russia, right? Russia and Ukraine, and what would be moral responses there, right? You could have somebody in and you would think, that's perfectly normal and good and right to do. That's what a congregation like this could do. Where many congregations would think, what? What are you? Aren't we supposed to be talking about the Bible? Right, see what I'm saying? So our experience. I want to poll you real quick. How well does your congregation talk about politics? Right, I've just given you one example of the kind of talk you could have. You could have someone come in and give. Or this one. Would your church host a series of talks by academics on the history of U.S. immigration policy? Okay. I got a thumbs up, a nod, another thumbs up. Okay, the last time I gave this talk, here are the responses below. This was to a presbytery, and some said, of course, yeah, I think we might do that. I think we might. Maybe if things are going well. I don't think so. That would be way too, or no way. But what I'm hearing is DCPC is a big yes there. Yeah, of course we can do that, Dave. We do that kind of thing all the time. Okay, so again, you guys are a little unusual here, and you're probably bored to this point in the talk. Let me see if I can bring some rage. Conventional thinking versus rethinking. So the conventional thinking, I've already given, I've rehearsed this now. Politics is too hot to touch. Churches that discuss politics do so at their own peril, right? You know that now. What we're saying this morning is politics is too hot. What I want to argue is politics, even not for the DCPCs of the world, for those other churches that are afraid of it. I want to say politics is too hot to leave untouched. It's too hot to leave untouched. Churches that avoid politics do so at their own peril. I want to say they're in trouble if they don't talk about politics. And I'm not saying they have to talk about Russia and Ukraine or immigration. Well, let me tell you what I'm talking about. Why is it too hot to okay. Well, let's do this fast. Partisan polarization. The big picture. This is the big picture. Parties have become more clearly ideologically defined. Right? Anyone disagree with that? I remember growing up taking a poli-sci class, and the professor was moaning about how wishy-washy the parties are, how regional they are, how open to compromise. And I thought, I was a young, stupid, kid, and I thought, yeah, we want parties to stand for something. Now, look where we are. Yeah. Party affiliation serves as a social marker or label on one's identity, your personal identity. That is, it helps tell you and others who you are. Okay, see, that's a big, it's not this pragmatic choice, I go with this party, I go with that party, or that's my politics. Now it's about who I am. That is a huge shift. That's a long story too, right? Individuals, point 3, are more likely to spend time with other partisans. Who are you hanging around with? This word beneath that, sorting. It turns out we've sorted in our spheres, like in our churches, into, well, that's mainly a Democrat church. That's mainly a Republican church. So it's harder and harder to maintain a church that's diverse. I got a couple of head nods. Anybody want to say anything there? You have any experience there? Were you in a church that was kind of, could hear different opinions and then no? Yes, ma'am.
What if you don't agree at times with either party and so you're not affiliated with either one, but you were instead non-registered as, one of the...
Well, that could be your middle of the road, right?
No.
Or it could be your...
I'm just saying, I think sometimes we give the parties too much power.
Oh, sure. I was going to say a person could be middle of the road and both parties look too extreme. That's kind of the talk you hear a lot these days, as if they're equally to blame. We can talk about that. Then you can also be on the further left or further right than the parties, right? And say, I don't really feel at home in those. But yeah, definitely. That's the feeling of so many, I think, is that we've given the parties too much power. And that's what this talk is in some ways about. Yeah, so I'm right with you, totally. Yes?
In your statement that rethinking means that churches avoid politics do so at their own peril, what kind of peril?
I'm getting there, definitely. Okay, let me move us along. Partisan differences are no longer seen primarily as policy differences, but as moral differences. On a poll, they asked Republicans and Democrats, what's your son or your daughter is bringing home a date to meet the parents. They asked Republicans this, what was the worst thing? What was the nightmare scenario for the majority, not all, for the majority of Republicans? They're bringing home a member of the same sex, right? They asked Democrats this. What did Democrats, the majority of them, say? They're bringing home a Republican. So yeah, the difference is exactly felt deep. That this is not just a party affiliation. We can agree about a lot of things. We can come together. Hey, in America, what big things? This is my favorite question about politics. What big things can we come together? And you just can't come up with anything, right? Well, a pandemic. Sure. Climate change. Well, not really. You just keep going. So the inability to come together points to our partisan differences and how deep it goes, and then you get it in your personal relationships, right, where you just feel alienated from some people. Okay, keep going. So polarization and congregations. What we have there are sorting, and we've already hinted at this. Partisans look for churches where they feel comfortable, right? Already alluded to this. One reason almost all of us go to church is for some comfort. So if you're feeling partisan, you don't want to be at a Republican. If you're a partisan Democrat, you don't want to be at a Republican church. That's not going to be comfortable for you, right? You're going to be hearing about the evils of this sex and that sex and all this. So that's one thing. Same for the Republican. Oh my gosh, if I hear about, our heart goes out for the people at the border one more time, I'm going to explode. Right? Both sides, neither of them. So sorting, big deal in religion and in other places. Churches can accommodate or avoid politics altogether. So if you've got these churches sorting on you, right? What are you thinking as pastor? do pastors like to bring rage? Do pastors like to evoke in their congregations rage? Of course not, right? So if you're a Republican pastor, if you're a pastor of a Republican-leaning congregation, what are you saying about the vaccine? Right? It would be almost a point of moral courage to speak up and say you ought to be vaccinated. Right? So, so generally, though, you're going to accommodate, that is, reinforce the beliefs of your community. It is, because if you don't do that, what are folks going to do? They are, in America, right, you just go down the street, go around the corner, or you get angry and say, this is my church, you get out. Right? So the preaching and education both will tend to, again, accommodate political beliefs or avoid it altogether. Polarized faith, faith in God, or party. So then the question comes back on us, what do we have? Do we have what's driving the ship? What's steering the ship? What's driving the bus? Is it our party identity, or is it our religious identity? Right? Which one tends to dominate? Right? And what I've just said is it tends to be, in so many churches, party affiliation. Right? Which is just stunning when you think about it. That we say, it is, but don't we all have that? How many of you have thought or said something like that? Man, those folks are just about their party. Right? I don't see how they can think God is for that. Yeah. Head nods. So that's a little bit of an intuitive feeling these days, I think. Okay, we go. So that's what's at our own peril. One, do we want our own faith described, whether it's a judgment day or a neighbor says, or we take a hard look in the mirror, do we want our own faith described as a partisan faith? That's one peril. Is there what check is there on us? Can we receive, it turns out to be a great introduction because it just ties in so many ways. Can we receive views that provoke us, that cause us to think, that challenge us, maybe even come closer to enraging us? I don't know if I want to go that far, but, is everything just right down our lane and we just find ourselves nodding our head, or does something make a step back and say, whoa, I hadn't thought about it that way. If we're never doing that, we may be in trouble there of partisan faith. All right, that's kind of an obvious point, right, and an old point. Theologians worry about that all the time. Has your faith been captured by politics? Okay, that's not the real point of this talk. Here's the real point. The second point, the second peril and the more tangible peril. So is where have all the kids gone, or where are they going? Okay, that's part two. So the life cycle. If you look at this chart on the life cycle, can you see that? This is a traditional model, this first chart. So it's a kind of upside down triangle, and it's got a flow to it. So the first thing that shapes you, right, are your social demographics. This is not Dave True. This is kind of standard sociology talk. Okay, then what would happen so that's going to be your family, your religion, your class. All these things go into shaping and informing you. Then the next thing that comes on top of that or layers in with that is party ID or party identification. Okay, so I tend to be Democrat, or I tend to be Republican or independent or green or whatever. And then I bring all that to certain issues. What are we going to do about Russia? Or what are we going to do about inflation? Or what are we going to do about climate change? And those things help me make decisions, right? So now I've got some values, some opinions, all that. You with me? Good. And then you get, and now we got an election, and I've got a candidate to decide about, and the candidate's image will also inform me, right? And Americans tend to like taller white males, right? Or which one's more important, tall or ethnicity? This is we don't need to go down there, but yes.
Dave, I'm wondering, I was thinking that issues would go before party identification, and that if the church is looking openly at issues, we're not really talking about a Democrat or Republican, we're just open to the issues. And the issues may then inform the party. So why here does party come first, issues second? Because I don't see DCPC as, or churches talk, well, this church talking about Republican or Democrat. We're looking at complex issues, and we do so openly.
Well, that would be impressive on DCPC's part, and we've already said, hey, you guys look a little different. So, you know, I don't know what's, or it could be you personally. That's what you aspire to. But this is what sociologists have said is how most people operate. Not churches, but how most people. Okay, and if this were true, you might be going, not bad, right, because where's religion? Well, it's at least on the ground floor now, it's competing with class and ethnicity and, on and on, but at least it's there. Look at the next chart. Partisan polarization and the new life cycle. So start over on the left with me. You're socialized into a religion, right? Your parents, your grandparents, your aunt or your uncle, your buddy takes you, whatever. You have an unstable in childhood PID, party identification. So it's in flux. You're a 7-year-old. What do you know? You're excited about chewing gum and your new bike. I don't know. About your new device. Okay, let's go to adolescence. What happens, can you read this chart? What happens in adolescence? What typically, just you know this, right? Well, sometimes kids say, I got to move away from what my parents did. So the church and religion, I don't know about that. You want to give a little distance there. As the chart says, rebel against religion on outskirts of religion. One of the two, right? Typically. And anybody want to, not that there aren't counter examples, right? This is a generality, not an absolute, but that's kind of become very typical of American life and youth culture. What happens with politics? That your party ID crystallizes. In other words, hardens, forms. It crystallizes. Okay? Anybody seeing a problem starting to develop? Okay, young adulthood, I'm still, hey, college, what's college? What's church and college about? Sleeping. I mean, right? I was weird as a college student. I sometimes wanted to go to church, right? That was just super weird for my friends. Meanwhile, partisan ID, party ID, has internalized and become stable. So I'm a member of the Young Republicans, or I think Republicans are crazy and I'm a Democrat, right? are you starting to see a problem here? For at least certain religions, maybe all of them in different ways. So you get out of college, adulthood 1, you return or not to religion. Okay, so then there's no real problem, right? That's our kind of what we've come to accept. People get married, start having kids, they come back. And then adult 2, your religious ID becomes stable again. So what's the problem then? Go down to the next page or next slide. Public perception, religious equal Republicans. That religion has, for many, become identified as a Republican pastime, as a Republican thing. So how's that work? Well, there's a God gap in every election. Every election, the pollsters, the sociologists, they go over all this, and you see Republicans voting maybe 10% more on and identifying with religion. That doesn't seem like so much, does it? 10%. There's a gender gap, there's a God gap, there's a white male gap, and so on. But what has happened is that Republican branding, that is, political elites in the Republican Party go out of their way to talk and show religion. Talk and show religion. Right? Anybody want to? Any thoughts here? This next slide is going to fill this out a little bit, but I just want to, if anybody has a thought or question here. It was right here and then here.
To me, part of the problem, or part of the issue, what do we identify, or what does one group identify as religious versus the other group? Do you identify individual liberties versus working for the common good? And that gets into your vaccination thing.
Definitely.
What do you think Christ would say about the issue?
Okay.
When he fed the 5,000, did he first put up a concession stand and a price on each product?
So I'm going to repeat that for the folks on YouTube. So what you're saying is, to you, the religions have different priorities. That the Republicans, Democrats are different religiously. They have different priorities. You say Republicans, it's all about individual liberties, and I heard a little bit of we gotta put a huge emphasis on freedom of the market and profit. I didn't hear, and the Democrat side, their religion tends to emphasize the common good. Do you want to add anything else there, or anybody want to respond to that? I don't think I'm saying, I think that jives with what I'm saying, right? I've said in many cases, but I mean, my push is, that makes sense because you're getting your marching orders from the party, right? So now, everyone in this room wants to say, no, I'm getting my marching orders from Jesus. So I'm not saying no to that. I'm saying, I'm going to give you that. You're all great. But I'm saying that's not how many Americans, but also most religious Americans say, no, I'm following Jesus all the way, buddy. It just so happens that Jesus absolutely lines up with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. That's where you go, I'm not sure. You want follow up?
Yeah, I had an old friend and a Presbyterian minister tell me that there's proof in the Bible that Christ was a Democrat. He rode into Jerusalem on a donkey and
That is a nice moment of levity. Thank you. Okay, so we got that, and yes.
Okay, back to your
the old model, right? The upside down triangle? Oh, the daunting.
Polarization and lifestyle.
Yes, the new life cycle.
Okay, so I have found myself, and I think both of us would feel that that's not what happened in our case.
Yes, sure.
As we got a lot older, we became more understanding and questioning,
Mm.
and able to understand other things and other people and other points of view. And to the point that we classify ourselves as independent. I don't want to be so partisan.
Mm-hmm.
One way or the other. I'm independent. I'd like to make up my own mind. Just a
Yeah. I hear, yeah, I'll repeat that. So,
about vaccination yesterday. Well, before the basketball game, if anybody went to the basketball game, and a lot of people did, they had a group protesting at the corner of Concord Road and Baker Drive, anti-vaxxers.
okay.
But that wasn't the point so much as,
Just how your story doesn't fit this chart doesn't tell your story, right?
well, that's right. Secondly, and to that particular point, the idea that Republicans are religious. And you're probably going to get on to more of a
Mm-hmm.
what kind of religion, more conservative, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
I can't identify one party more than another being religious.
Mm. Did you? Okay. Yeah, I just want to. I have a big point looming, so I want to rush us on a little bit, and I hate to interrupt at all. But I'm going to summarize what you said, and you correct me for the folks online. Hey, the new life cycle, that doesn't quite fit what's happened with us. Rather than our party ID stabilizing, we've gotten a little adventurous, or we've moved. It's not stable, it's unstable. And I sense from your remarks, y'all have been on a kind of journey. I don't know what your party ID was before, and I'm not asking you that, but and that's totally great and fine, and I appreciate that. And I think you can also recognize, there are going to be exceptions to the rule. So I think the chart still holds. Then there was a separate, and then just the illustrative point about the protesters, right? Where did the protesters fit on this chart? Well, they're not adult 2, right? They're not even adult 1. They're young adulthood, maybe even adolescence. Their religion is maybe fuzzy, but what's firming up? Their party. Isn't that so interesting? Isn't that so interesting? What is it about party that attracts young people and not religion?
Clear? They've got, this is it, this is the answer, you go with this, you've got.
Pam, I think that's my gut answer. Now, there's maybe a better answer, but why choose party? Because the party says, this way. We're going this way, and we're going this way now. What's religion say? Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you, honey. Come on back. We want you right here. Right? That's my a little bit silly take, but comfort, passion. Right? That's difficult, right? And Presbyterians aren't all comfort. We're cerebral. We like to be So I'm not necessarily talking about DCPC, but yeah, I think that's, now there's one more question or comment.
Is it ironic that the Souls to the Polls movement is identified with Democrats and is rejected by Republicans?
Yes. Yes, there is a great irony there, isn't there? And what do Republicans want to say about, I don't know, souls to the polls, or what's Bishop Barber's campaign? What do they want to say about that? If you're a Republican, what do you say about that? That's not Jesus, that's communism. That's socialism. Right? So both parties can make these moves about the other party. Now, I'm not saying that all parties are all wrong all the time, by any means. I'm not encouraging you to renounce your party ID. So let's keep, okay, so we've got that. On the God gap, anyone, there was a comment, why identify Republican? Well, I'm not sure why people identify the Republican Party as a religious party, and I'm not saying all people do. I'm saying 10% more and growing do. And why do they? Well, religion in America is sometimes more conservative, right? So if what's more conservative religion up for? Rights talk, we like rights talk on the right. So, and that, say, pro-life, right? And has one party been out in front on pro-life, talking about it? Absolutely, right? So you can go that route. Then you can go this route. There's these protests outside the White House. What was Donald Trump's reaction? He goes to the street, poses right in front of the church, pulls up a Bible. What's everybody on the middle left say? What a buffoon, how dare he do that? What do people on the right say? He shares our faith. Right? That symbols matter. Right? Pictures matter. Signs matter. Right? So that's the God gap. The Evangelical Party. Keep going with me. Evangelicals remain the largest religious group in the GOP coalition. We can talk all about evangelicals. That's, we're just throwing that term, right out at you here without really talking about it. But you can see there the breakdown and increasing from 2007 to 2014. So this is a little dated. But what's shrinking and what's growing? So evangelicals grow a little bit, mainlines shrink. Notice that mainline Protestants make up less percentage of the Republican coalition. Historically, black Protestants consistent. Catholics shrink a little bit. And then other groups. So not much change there. The unaffiliated, more unaffiliated is the biggest single jump there. But you see the big group, almost 40% are evangelicals. Right? So that's going to be a more conservative, Bible-talking religion. The rise of the nuns. The quote nuns, they're the largest single religious group affiliated with Democrats. That is on a box, are you Christian, Jewish, Muslim, none? Are you Presbyterian, Catholic, Baptist, none? Right? I don't identify with organized religion. I don't affiliate. The largest single party within the Democratic coalition, right? The nuns, the unaffiliated. So, right, the idea here is more evidence that the parties, one going right religion, right religion, left unaffiliated spiritual. Any thoughts on these charts? Yes, sir.
It's the structured religions that are losing population.
That's right. That's right. Like people who show up Sunday morning and stuff.
No, the people who show up other times as well, because the evangelicals.
Sure. I'm just joking about here we are in a very nice structure. Right? I'm all for structured religion, so that's not a slam on you guys. Okay, let me deliver the hard punch. So what happens when, I have an 18-year-old, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen to her, but what would be a worry if I make it more personable, if I bring it down to bite size? Well, she takes some time away from religion, and let's say she's Republican. Let's just say she's Republican and she has a liberal leaning friend. When she is ready to settle down, she's thinking, hey, I'd like to maybe get married. What is she going to think? Church is a comfortable place to do that. Right? She's a Republican. Churches are okay for Republicans. Her liberal-leaning friend is thinking, I love Abby. I ain't going back to the same place. That's for Republicans. Now, my church back in Davidson, that was different. But I'm up here in Atlanta now, and this place is totally Republican churches. I'm not going back. I would not feel comfortable there. That's the second great peril. For the right, it's that it simply reproduces a party. Right? It becomes a captured partisan faith. For the left, for liberal churches, for liberal-leaning churches, is that our young people don't feel comfortable unless they're at, that congregation they grew up in. And we're a highly mobile society, right? A place like Gibson is sending kids everywhere. Where are those kids going to go? Where are they going to feel comfortable? Right? You say, well, they're smart enough to know the difference. There are some good churches out there for them. Yes, absolutely. Many of them. And maybe all those days, to be a little silly and hopeful. But the idea is that over time, this will erode mainstream and moderate liberal churches. That's the big peril. So if you can't talk about this, in 20 years, you'll be looking at, empty pews. Absolutely. And not saying Davidson College per se. The churches, this will take its toll over time. Okay, so next slide. Is the situation hopeless? Well, there are two interesting exceptions. Say, on the life cycle, adolescents with low levels of political knowledge. So they don't get a firm party ID when they're young, and so they have a chance to come back to religion before their ID firms up, their party ID. So that's one thing. Now that's a problem for us, right? Because we want our young people to be educated. So not sure what to do with that. The second one, African American youth churches, they don't follow this cycle. They have a stronger identification with their communities. Now, I want to be careful there and not to idealize black churches because they have struggled with membership issues as well recently. But these two give us a little hint, right, is how I'm taking this, that The life cycle isn't a law. It doesn't have to happen like this. You have to find a way to do things in an unusual way. Right? So, here's a couple of thoughts, and I welcome your thoughts. 3 suggestions on how to do things a little differently. How can we shake up this life cycle where these young, these young progressive Christians, let's say, feel like coming back, or they never leave, or something. And on the right, if you know, I've already laid out the big question there. Can your faith ever be challenged? Can your faith ever challenge your party? If you're just nodding every time at your party, then they've become one thing. Okay, now 3 suggestions if you're middle or left. Share a theological vision. Share a theological vision bigger than politics. So sitting right out here right now, let's just make this a little personal. And again, you don't have to respond vocally, but can you identify a theological vision this congregation has? If you feel like you could tell me that in a sentence or 2, there's a chance then your young people are hearing it, and then that is capturing their attention, their passion, their imagination, right? This thing we spoke of earlier. Can the religious life animate? Can it inspire like politics does? Right? So that's one suggestion. Can we do that? And I'm not saying that's easy. But 2, provide forums for the church to practice being a community of moral discernment. So you guys just check. Hey, man, we got that one. You know better how well you do that than I do. 3rd, equip the saints to serve as citizens. That seems awfully fuzzy. Just forget that one. I'm not sure what that even... Oh, down below, equipping the saints. What does a saint need to participate as a citizen? All right, so to equip a saint, the saint has to be... What's equipping the saint? You're strong enough to weather the storm of partisan polarization, of political polarization. So your faith is strong enough. Right? That's the claim there. Then we say, what characteristic or virtues are needed to participate faithfully in politics? Right? So the claim here, right, is your religion is inspiring your participation, not the other way around. Real quick. Number 1, do you have vision? Do you have vision? And we're just hearing that over and over again now in this, aren't we? Do you have vision? Does your community have vision? What is the community or the church's purpose or goal? Do you have a clear sense of that? Is that shared within your community? Is that kind of discourse you can identify and you talk about it? And that vision even welcomes change. So the vision is so important. We're going to tear this down, or we're going to erect that, or we're going to go do this. So you're not afraid of the new, right? That's the kind of vision it is. 2, is your community practical? Are these citizens you're equipping, are they practical? And that doesn't mean, that's a little tricky what practical is, right, in our talk. Sometimes that means, look, I can make the hard decisions and cut staff. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I want to kill that. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, can your members identify the goods in this community. Do you know what I mean when I say goods? Can your members identify those sources of meaning, those things you that are real resources in the community? Right? So the idea then, so one, you have vision, two, you're practical. So the idea is if you're going for this goal, you're going to keep in mind your resources, your goods, right? And that these are things we talk about together. That's going to prepare you to do that in a public forum. And I know we need to end, so that's my talk, and that's the hope. The hope is then these virtues give the religion traction and staying power versus the party. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. It's a real pleasure to talk with you guys. You're so open and thoughtful. I know we're out of time. If you want to stick around and ask or talk, I'm happy to talk with you. But otherwise, have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, well, I don't disagree with you. I think it's a nice point. Yeah. And I think that varies from high school to high school. You know, you can get really good instruction and get really good.
Talk high school, I know.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You brought out about the fact that Catholic, the church looks at that. I think that's
Yeah. Well, thanks.
yeah, it is a great.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Quick story about that. I was a 12th grader here, new to the school, new to the church, new to town, first year of integration in schools, and had moved from a farm town, Michigan. Prior to that, I lived in the city and had gone to integrated junior highs.
No big deal to you.
It was so what, yeah. We had in this room, I vividly remember some of the speakers. Saw some film about race issues. I have no recollection of the topic. I remember the content. I don't remember anything about the title. And then an open forum that lasted for an hour or more. Some committee chair was running it. It wasn't, there was no guest speaker or anything. But we heard the most amazing range of comments about race. But the message to me was it was fair game to talk about really good controversies and go up still friends.
Yeah. And to do that
That
at
was
church.
a really important message.
Yeah.
There was another one that was held in the parlor a couple of weeks later. I think it may have been a series. And I don't remember. It was part of the youth fellowship program, but we were 10 or 15 of the people in the room. There was plenty of other people. And I remember leaving absolutely startled by the racism of some of my friends' parents and the open, welcoming attitude of others that didn't fit my impressions. I'd only known these people 4, 5, 6 months. It was so open, so startling to see that kind of an issue brought forth, and probably kept me in this church as a teenager far better than any number of other things might have.
The
It
second,
really was, it was fascinating.
that was a second talk?
It
Or that was part of the
was,
first
I
talk?
think it must have been a series because
Okay.
I don't remember any details about it. It was a youth fellowship program that week,
No,
but I don't
that's-
think we'd organized it.
okay.
I think it was
That's a
going
great,
on, and senior highs, you didn't need to come to this.
yeah, that's a great story.
It
Yeah.
was certainly a profound, it had a profound impact on me, and I remember it very well because of walking out startled by comments from everybody. The kids talked as well as the adults. There were probably 30, 40 people.
And I mean, what impressed you was,
was the range of opinions
range.
that still could be friends.
in this church.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that was already visible, as far as I know, we had one family that abandoned the public schools that year.
One thing.
Which
Okay.
really startled
Right.
me,
Right.
that it was that small.
Yeah.
I was new, I didn't.
There wasn't this massive resistance.
There was none, and there were segregation academies all over Charlotte. That,
Nearby.
some of which turned into decent private schools, many of which just floundered, but there was none up here.
Yeah. So it wasn't per se that y'all were talking about the issue.
Oh, no, the forum, that program was very specific